Hello everyone. In this video, let's discuss about constructor. Constructor is a special method in class that gets called automatically whenever we are creating an object. So whenever an object is created, constructor is called automatically. What is the purpose of constructor? So the purpose of the constructor is to initialize the object properties, or we can say to give the default or initial values to the variables. So it also ensures the object starts in a valid state. Okay. So let me take an example and I'll explain you what is the purpose of constructor. And we have to remember certain rules of a constructor. So constructor name will be same as that of the class name. So the constructor will not return any type. So we have mentioned constructor is a special method, but it will not return anything like a method. Okay. By default it returns the object, but there is no return type and all, but by default the constructor returns the object. So automatically the constructor will be called whenever the new keyword is used. Okay. A class can have multiple constructors. That is what called as constructor overloading. So we'll take an example and we'll discuss that in detail. So I'll go for the class called student. Let me create a class student. So I'll give the members of the classes string name int age. So I'm going to take two variables. I'm going to give the method as void display. I'm going to display the name of the student and the age of the student. So I'll give system.out.println name. I'll give a space and then I'll give age. Okay. Now I'll go to the main class. So I'll create an object scanner s equal to new scanner to get the input value from the user. System.in. Okay. So here I have to create an object for the class called student. So here we have two members, right? Whenever we are creating an object, the value by default will be given as 0 for integer and null value for name. So I'll create an object student s equal to new student. Okay. Fine. So here I have created an object for this scanner class. Further, I have to import the package called util. Import java.util.star. Fine. Now I'll call the method called display. So here we have not initialized any value for name and age. Okay. So as I mentioned already, whenever you are creating an object, by default the constructor will be called, that is what called as a default constructor, and it initializes the default values for the variables. So let me print and check s.display. Let me save the code and let me run the code. See, for name it is giving null, and for for age it is giving 0, because whenever the object is created, it initializes the default values. This is what called as default constructor also. Whenever an object is created, the default constructor will be called and it initializes the default values. Okay. So when we talk about constructor, there are three types of constructor. So default constructor, user defined constructor, and parameterized constructor. So default constructor is nothing but whenever you are creating an object, by default the constructor will be called and it initializes the null values. Okay. Now let's talk about user defined constructor. See, the user defined constructor is nothing but, so here I am creating an object. So when I am creating an object, a constructor will be called and that constructor is defined by the user. So constructor has certain rules. So the constructor name should be same as that of the class name. What is the class name here? Student. So this is the constructor. So constructor should be same as that of the class name. So in the constructor, I'm initializing the values. So if you are not initializing any value, by default it will have the default values. Here I am initializing the values in the constructor. So name is equal to Tamil Arasan LQ. Age is equal to 32. Okay. So I have initialized the values. So this we call it as user defined constructor. So user is initializing the values. Now when I run the code, earlier it was giving null and 0. Now whenever the object is created, the constructor student will be called. So when we are calling this constructor, Tamil will be initialized to name, 32 will be initialized to age. And when we are trying to print name and age, it prints Tamil and 32. Let me save this code and let me run the code. See, Tamil and 32. This is what called as user defined constructor. So here there is no return type of the constructor. Okay, but by default returns the object. Okay, we'll see the difference between a constructor and a method in detail. Okay, so far we have discussed the default constructor and the user defined constructor. Now let's discuss about parameterized constructors. So parameterized constructors are thing, but here in the constructor I'll pass the parameters. So I'm going to pass Tamil and I'll give the age as 32. So here what happens, whenever you are defining the constructor will have a parameter. So constructor name should be same as that of the class name. Fine. String n comma string a. So here we have two arguments. Why? Because here in the constructor we are passing two parameters. So here what I am going to do, whatever the value stored in n, that I am going to assign it to name, and whatever I am storing in a, that I will be assigning it to age. Okay, let me save this code and let me save this code as well. Okay, let me run the code now. Constructor student is undefined. Okay, the error is very simple. So here in the main method I have given string and an integer value, but when we are defining the constructor I have given string and string. This is the error. So I have to give int a. Let me save this code and let me run the code. See, Tamil 32. Here what happens, I am creating an object for this scanner class. Fine, I am creating an object. So here I am passing the arguments, that is I am passing the parameters. That is why this constructor is called parameterized constructor. So here whenever the object is created, Tamil will be stored in n, 32 will be stored in a, and I am assigning that value to the variable name and age. I am assigning the value. After this, when we are trying to call a method s.display, it prints Tamil and 32. This is what called as parameterized constructor. So totally there are three types of constructor. One is default constructor, user defined constructor, another one is parameterized constructor. Okay, fine. Here we have one more concept called constructor overloading. What is the meaning of constructor overloading? I'll tell you. So here we'll create two objects. Okay, and we'll print two objects. So here first I'll have two members, string name and age I'll have. Okay, so here first I'll create a object. So student s1 equal to new student. I'm creating an object called s1 here. Now the constructor I'll give it as student. That's all. Okay, I'll initialize name is equal to not provided. I'll give. Okay, and the age is equal to 0. I'll give. So here what happened? Whenever I'm creating an object called s1, automatically it goes to the constructor. Okay, that is user defined constructor, and name will be initialized as not provided and age will be initialized as 0. Now I am going to create one more constructor called parameterized constructor. Student s2 is equal to new student. I'll give the name as Tamil and the age is 32. This is what called as parameterized constructor. So let me create a parameterized constructor. Student string n comma int a. So here what I have done, name is equal to Tamil name is equal to n, age is equal to a. So here Tamil will be stored in n, 32 will be stored in a. So the value will be initialized to name and age. So here we have to know one difference, default constructor and parameterized constructor. So whenever you are calling this object, if you are not creating this constructor, it initializes the default values. Okay, here if you are creating this constructor, it will not initialize the default values. Instead, whatever the value I am giving inside, that value will be initialized to the members. Okay, Fine. Now I am going to create a method called display. Void display. So I'm going to give system.out.println name plus age. So here constructor overloading is having multiple constructors with different parameters. See here 0 parameters, here we have 2 parameters. So this is what called as constructor overloading. So constructor 1, constructor 2. Now when I run the code, first S1 will be called student. So we are creating an object called S1. So what happened? Automatically this constructor will be called, and for the object S1, for name it will initialize not provided, for age it gives 0. When I create second object called S2, it initializes the name value as Tamil and age is 32. It initializes. So I have a method. Let me call the method with 2 objects. S1.display, S2.display. So I have called 2 objects. When I am calling 2 objects, first it will give not provided and 0. Second it will give Tamil and 32. Let me run the code now. See, not provided 0. Second Tamil and 32. This is what called as constructor overloading. So we can have n numbers of constructors. There is multiple constructors with different types of arguments or different number of arguments. That is parameters. Arguments or parameters, both are same. Okay. This is what called as constructor overloading. So here you can get the input value from the user and you can pass it in the constructor also. For example, for S2, I'll get the input value from the user. For example, string s equal to sc dot next line, and then int age equal to sc dot next int. So here I am getting the name and the age from the user, and that I'll be passing it as an argument. That is parameter s comma a. This is also possible. Let's run the code now. See, it is getting the input value. I'll give the name as Tamil, age as 32. See, not provided 0, Tamil and 32. I'll give some different name. Let's check. I'll give Venki 31. See here, not provided 0 with the object S1, and I've got 2 input values called Venki and 31 that I'm passing as a parameter when creating the object S2. So automatically that will be initialized to this, passed to this constructor n and a, and the value of name and the age for the object S2 will be initialized Venki and 31. Whenever I'm trying to call the method display with the object S2, Venki and 31 will be printed. Okay, that's all.